All right, welcome back to the innovation stage. I'm pleased to introduce our next speaker, Milos Maricic. He is the president at Altruist League. Please join me in welcoming him to our virtual stage.
Hi, everybody. It's great to be with you all today. Let me just share my slides. There we go. We should be good to go. So yes, I am Milos Maricic, president of the Altruist League, and I'll talk a little bit more about the league in a second. But let me actually start with a question for you all, or more like a statement. By 2025, all serious philanthropy will be outsourced. What do you think about that statement? Sounds a bit unreasonable, doesn't it? Because there are so many philanthropic foundations out there. Any self-respecting company has a corporate social responsibility wing or department. So it doesn't seem very reasonable at the first glance. But if you're following the field of philanthropy closely, you will have noticed that it's in a crisis. And the main line of that, of the criticism is as follows. The wealthy have been investing for more than 100 years into ostensibly solving the systemic problems of our time. And the systemic problems are getting worse. Wealth inequality is growing. Women's empowerment is stagnating. We're seeing racial injustice. We're seeing threats to democracy. So, both popular texts and increasingly academic texts are seeing philanthropy as a charade, a way just to look good, to feel good, but to essentially avoid paying taxes first and foremost. So many among the philanthropists are noticing this, and they're saying we should do something about it. So how do we make our philanthropy really, really impactful? And it turns out that that is actually really hard. Changing the world is the hardest thing to do. You need your change theory. You need to understand all the levers of the world and how to manipulate them. You need to go and source the right investments, because the best world-changing organizations out there are not exactly going to come to your doorstep and be filling out your 30-page grant proposals. And also you need to be measuring results in the real world instead of reading annual reports, because we all know annual reports are always super positive. So these people come to us, and this is why the Altruist League exists. So we create sophisticated AI-driven portfolios for real systemic change. How can that look in practice? So for example, you want to improve the position of women in Southeastern Africa. So the mainstream model of philanthropy would find maybe 2 or 3 NGOs in the region. Usually it's the same NGOs that all the Western donors invest in. They would give them money and just hope for the best. The League has a much more systematic approach. So we invest in dozens of social movements and women-led citizen organizations on the ground, raising awareness about the problem. We invest in some independent media that's also spreading the right messages. We invest in some positive lobbying groups that will target the right politicians. We invest in some positive practical legislation so that, for example, women can inherit property, which in many countries in that region they cannot. And in some cases, we need to also invest in fundamental science that proves that empowering women is good for the society. Not to mention working with religious leaders, with men's organizations. So it's a completely different approach. It's a totally holistic approach along the entire value chain of systemic change. And obviously, this is extremely hard. And this is why we have more than 100 analysts worldwide in 90 plus countries, people who live on the ground, who track all these movements, who know the people who lead them, so who can get the first-hand information for us. And then we have the other half almost of our staff is just our data scientists and machine learning experts who are working on our model. So let's talk a little bit more about, this is our change theory. Like I mentioned earlier, change theory is extremely important, and we collaborate with the likes of Harvard, Stanford, and many other universities and institutes for developing our model. And it is based on investment in citizen movements, like I already mentioned, nonviolent, and we see them as the basis for social change. And we also target really the systemic problems: climate, democracy, women's rights, racial justice, economic opportunity. We track more than 20,000 movements worldwide, and we have by far the biggest data set of such organizations in the world. We track about 35 parameters per organization. We try to keep it really down to really the parameters with any kind of predictive power. And we have about 20 plus years of historical data on the transactions going on in the space. This doesn't sound like much, but actually this space is notorious. It's not so easy to find data about transactions. It's not like you can dig them out from some database. And then a little bit about our model. So it's a mix. Some of it is analyst driven on the ground. So the analysts on the ground understand the leadership structure of the organization, how quickly the membership is growing, the tactics, track record of influencing policy, and all this has actually an impact on how successful the organization ends up becoming. And then we have an NLP-driven layer, which looks at public sentiment around the organization in question, the media profile mentions, where they are going in terms of how the society feels about them. So this gives us a pretty good idea about which are these organizations that are about to be changing things in their society today, tomorrow, or within a couple of years, and then changing the world in such a, in doing so. And this then helps us, in addition with this historical data that I talked about, match different organizations to the portfolios of our clients. So this is essentially our value proposition. We manage last year we managed about $500 million. We allocated about $500 million of our clients' funds worldwide into systemic change. And this year it's probably going to be much more than that. Essentially, this is growing exponentially, as I mentioned. Something on our business model. So we like to think ourselves as a coalition for change. So we see our clients as members of this coalition. So we charge them a yearly membership, and then for those for whom we manage their allocations and their portfolios and manage and calibrate, we take a management fee. And typically we target what you would call ultra high net worth individuals, and two sort of sub-segments in there, young people who are belief driven, who just inherited money and are disgusted with what's happening in the philanthropy world. They want change. And then people who are further along towards the end of their career and who don't have things to prove anymore and are really thinking about leaving a legacy. So that was the kernel of our initial audience. But then as we grow, we are now getting approached by top tier foundations trying to really make their philanthropy more impactful, more systemic. And then going back to my initial statement, we're increasingly getting approached by companies because they're understanding that they can never have the kind of operation that we can. If they organize it in-house, their philanthropy will always be more or less cosmetic, and they're getting huge pressure from their employees, their clients, their shareholders, to be an active participant in changing the world systemically. And so they come to us for this, and just like they go to experts for their IT or customer service, they come to us as experts for directing their philanthropy. And increasingly we work with governments in the Americas, Europe, and some places in the Middle East. Obviously, there are many challenges with this, competing for talent, growing the market, the price points that we charge are much higher, so the willingness to pay has to be higher, et cetera, et cetera. It's an unpredictable environment, so investing in grassroots organizations. So, but all in all, it's a super exciting space, and I would be delighted to answer any questions or comments you might have. Here's my email, so please do be in touch, and I'll stop sharing now.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Milos. Thank you for sharing with us. The audience is giving you a big virtual round of applause. All right, for the audience, it's time for you to make your way to your next session, but along the way, make sure to accept your connection request and check out our AI exhibits. Thanks so much, and we'll see you around.